My husband Marcus pulled me toward the ballroom entrance like I was an embarrassment he needed to hide quickly. Stay near the kitchen doors. Your outfit looks cheap. He said those words without even looking at me. After 28 years of marriage, I had learned to expect nothing better from him. Before we proceed, thank you for watching Her Voice Narrative. Please subscribe and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. The charity gala was packed with wealthy people wearing designer clothes and fake smiles. Marcus had insisted I come tonight, even though he usually left me at home during his business events. The new CEO of Richardson Tech was going to be here. Marcus needed to impress him badly. His consulting firm was drowning in debt, and this was his last chance to save everything. I wore a simple black dress I found at a thrift store for $30. Marcus gave me $200 each month for all my personal needs. Clothes, toiletries, everything had to come from that small amount. I had become an expert at making nothing look like something over the years. Find a corner and stay there. Marcus hissed at me as we entered the glittering ballroom. Do not talk to anyone important. Do not mention anything about our personal life. And for God's sake, do not embarrass me tonight. Those 3 words had ruled my entire marriage. Do not embarrass me. Do not embarrass me by laughing too loud at dinner parties. Do not embarrass me by wearing the wrong clothes. Do not embarrass me by existing in spaces where he needed to look successful. I nodded silently and watched Marcus stride away toward a group of men in expensive suits. His shoulders were straight with false confidence, but I could see the desperation in how quickly he moved. He was hunting for connections that might save his failing business. I found my assigned spot near the service entrance where shadows from large plants would hide me from view. A waiter offered me champagne, but I took water instead. Alcohol made Marcus angry when I drank it at his events. He said I became too relaxed and said things that made him look bad. Standing in my corner, I watched the room fill with people who measured their worth in stock prices and vacation homes. Women compared jewelry that cost more than our mortgage payment. Men laughed too loudly at jokes that were not funny. Everyone knew exactly where they belonged in this world of money and power. I did not belong here. I had never belonged in Marcus' world, even after 28 years of trying. My mind drifted back to another life. Another time when I was young and fearless and deeply in love with a man who made me feel like I mattered. That was before everything fell apart. Before I made choices that haunted me every single day. The energy in the ballroom suddenly changed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the main entrance like flowers following the sun. I stretched on my toes to see what was causing such a reaction. A tall man walked into the room wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. His dark hair had silver streaks at the temples that made him look distinguished rather than old. He moved with quiet confidence that comes from real power, not the desperate imitation Marcus always displayed. Even from across the crowded room, something about this man made my heart skip. The way he held his head slightly tilted when he looked around, the strong jawline, the intense dark eyes that seemed to see everything. That is him. Someone whispered nearby. That is Daniel Blackwood, the new CEO of Richardson Tech, worth billions. Built his empire from nothing. Daniel. The name hit me like lightning striking the ground at my feet. My hand started shaking so badly I had to set down my water glass before I dropped it. Could not be him. After 30 years, it could not possibly be my Daniel. But as he turned to shake hands with someone, I saw his profile clearly. That nose that had been broken during a college football game. That slight scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled politely at something someone said. It was Daniel Blackwood. The man I had loved with every piece of my heart when I was 24 years old. The man whose baby I had carried for 2 months before losing everything. The man I had walked away from because I thought I was protecting him from his family wrath. My Daniel. Who was not mine anymore and had not been for 3 decades. He looked successful now. Powerful in a way that spoke of hard work and determination. The college student who used to share cheap pizza with me in tiny dorm rooms had become the kind of man who commanded boardrooms and built empires. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows, my heart pounding so hard my chest hurt. What was he doing here? How was it possible that he was the exact CEO Marcus desperately needed to impress? Across the room, Marcus spotted Daniel and immediately pushed through the crowd toward him. I watched in horror as my husband approached the man I had never stopped loving. Marcus extended his hand with that aggressive smile he used when he wanted something from people. Daniel shook his hand politely, but I could see even from far away that he was not really listening to whatever Marcus was saying. His eyes were scanning the crowd, searching for something or someone with an intensity that made my stomach flip. Then his gaze found mine. Everything stopped. The noise of the party faded away. The other people disappeared. For one eternal moment, Daniel Blackwood stared directly at me across that packed ballroom. His face went completely white. His lips parted in shock. The successful businessman mask crumbled, and for one heartbeat he was 25 again, looking at me the way he used to when we believed love could conquer anything. Then he was moving, walking straight toward me as if the hundreds of other people in that room did not exist. As if 30 years had not passed. As if I was still the woman he had planned to marry all those years ago. Marcus kept talking for several seconds before realizing Daniel was no longer listening. I saw my husband's confusion turn to alarm as he followed Daniel's line of sight and realized the CEO was heading directly toward me. Toward his wife who was supposed to stay hidden in the shadows. "Excuse me," Daniel said to Marcus without looking at him. His voice was deeper now, roughened by years and success, but it still made my knees weak. "I need to speak with your wife." Marcus sputtered something about Daniel making a mistake, about me being nobody important, but Daniel was not listening. He walked straight to my corner, stopped close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and sophisticated, nothing like the cheap aftershave he wore in college. "Sarah." He said my name, and after 30 years of not hearing it from his lips, tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. "Daniel," I whispered back, barely able to find my voice. Without hesitation, he reached out and took both my hands in his, the same way he used to when we were young. His hands were warm and steady, and I could feel he was not wearing a wedding ring. "I have been looking for you for 30 years. He said, and his voice was thick with emotion. His dark eyes were bright with tears he was trying not to shed. When he spoke again, his words carried across the ballroom that had gone completely silent. "I still love you." The sound of Marcus' champagne glass hitting the marble floor echoed like a gunshot through the stunned quiet. I could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything except stare at Daniel's face and see 3 decades of searching and longing and love that had somehow survived the impossible. "This is ridiculous." Marcus' voice cut through the moment like a knife. He pushed between Daniel and me, his face red with humiliation and rage. "Sarah, what the hell is going on here?" I opened my mouth but no words came out. How could I explain 30 years of buried heartache in front of a room full of strangers? How could I tell my husband that he had never been anything more than a safe choice after I lost the only man I ever truly loved? "Could we speak privately?" Daniel asked, his voice gentle but carrying the authority of someone who was used to being obeyed. "She is my wife," Marcus said loudly. "Anything you have to say to her, you can say in front of me." "Well," Daniel replied simply, his eyes never leaving my face. "Not." The weight of his gaze was almost unbearable. Could see questions there. Hurt that time had not healed. Love that had survived 3 decades of separation without any explanation. "Daniel," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Not here. Not like this." He nodded slowly, understanding in a way Marcus never had. "Course. But Sarah." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. White with silver letters. "Please call me. We need to talk." I took the card with shaking fingers. Our hands brushed for just a moment and the contact sent electricity through my entire body. A reminder of what it felt like to be touched with love instead of ownership. "We are leaving," Marcus announced loudly, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. Daniel's expression darkened as he saw Marcus' grip on me. For a moment I thought he might intervene. But I shook my head slightly and he stepped back, his jaw clenched with obvious effort. "I will be waiting for your call," he said quietly, and the promise in those words felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. Marcus dragged me through the ballroom past the staring faces and whispered speculations. I clutched Daniel's business card in my free hand, the sharp edges pressing into my palm. Behind us I could feel Daniel watching. Could feel the weight of 30 years of unanswered questions hanging in the air between us. The ride home was Marcus at his worst. Screaming about the humiliation I caused him. Demanding to know who Daniel was and why he claimed to love me. Threatening to make my life miserable if I ever spoke to that man again. But I barely heard him. My mind was spinning backward through time to a small college town where I had been young and in love and certain that nothing could ever tear us apart. How wrong I had been about that. Daniel and I met during our senior year at Colorado State University. I was studying education on a partial scholarship, working 2 jobs to pay for everything my financial aid did not cover. He was in business school, brilliant and ambitious, but also kind in a way that surprised me. Rich boys were not supposed to notice scholarship girls like me. But Daniel did. Our first conversation happened in the library during finals week. I was surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups, trying to memorize lesson plans for my teaching practicum. He approached with that slightly tilted head that meant he was thinking hard about something. "You look like you could use real food," he said, and his voice was warm with amusement. "The cafeteria closes in 15 minutes, but I know a place that stays open late. Best pancakes in town." I looked up, ready to politely decline. I did not have money for late-night diners, and I certainly did not have time for whatever game rich boys played with girls like me. But when I met his eyes, dark and serious and completely sincere, something inside me shifted. "I cannot afford diners," I said honestly. "But thank you. I did not ask if you could afford it," he replied gently. "I asked if you were hungry." That was Daniel. Direct and honest. Cutting through pretense to get to the heart of things. We went to the diner that night and he bought me pancakes and listened while I talked about my dreams of becoming a teacher, about the scholarship I was desperately trying not to lose. He did not try to impress me with stories about his family money. He just listened. Really listened in a way no one ever had before. We became inseparable after that. Daniel introduced me to his world of nice restaurants and campus events. But he also joined my world of study groups and shared meals in my tiny apartment. We talked about everything. Books and business ideas. Family and dreams. The future we were building together piece by careful piece. The night he proposed was perfect in its simplicity. We were sitting in our favorite spot by the campus lake watching the sunset over the mountains. Daniel pulled out his grandmother ring. An antique sapphire that had been in his family for generations. His hands shook as he slipped it onto my finger. "Marry me, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." I said yes without hesitation. We were 24 and believed that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. We made plans for a small ceremony after graduation. A honeymoon camping in the mountains. The apartment we would share while Daniel got his MBA and I started teaching. Everything seemed possible when you were 24 and in love. But Daniel's parents had different plans. Richard and Elizabeth Blackwood were old money from Boston. The kind of people who measured relationships by social advantage and business connections. When they learned about Daniel's engagement to a scholarship student from a working-class family, their response was swift and brutal. They threatened to cut Daniel off completely. No more tuition money. No trust fund. No place in the family business empire they had spent generations building. But worse than that, they threatened to destroy my scholarship and my future. Richard Blackwood had connections everywhere, including the university administration. One word from him and I would lose everything I had worked so hard to achieve. They cannot do this, Daniel said when he told me about their ultimatum. We were in his apartment and his face was white with fury. I will fight them. I will give up the money, the business, all of it. We will make our own way. But I was already pregnant with his child, though I had not told him yet. I had discovered it 3 days earlier, sitting on my bathroom floor with a pregnancy test in my shaking hands. 2 pink lines that changed everything. I had planned to tell Daniel that weekend. Had imagined his face lighting up with joy and wonder. We had talked about children, about the family we would build together someday. Someday had arrived sooner than expected, but we loved each other enough to handle anything. Except Richard Blackwood threats were not directed just at us anymore. They were directed at our unborn baby. At the future we were already creating together. If I refused his ultimatum, he would destroy Daniel's career prospects and eliminate my education. Our baby would be born into poverty and struggle. That night I made the hardest decision of my life. I chose to sacrifice our love to protect our child's future. The breakup was the hardest thing I had ever done. I met Daniel at our favorite coffee shop near campus. The one where we had spent countless hours studying together and planning our future. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at our usual table by the window. His face lit up when he saw me the way it always did. "There is my beautiful fiancé," he said, standing to kiss me. "How was your day?" I could not look at him directly. Instead I stared at the engagement ring on my left hand. The sapphire catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. "We need to talk, Daniel." Something in my tone must have warned him because his smile faded immediately. "What is wrong?" I forced myself to meet his eyes. Those dark eyes that had looked at me with such love and tenderness for the past year. "I have been thinking about our engagement. About what marriage would mean, babe." He sat down slowly, wariness creeping into his expression. "What about it? I do not think we are right for each other." The lie tasted like poison in my mouth. "We want different things from life." Daniel stared at me for a long moment, confusion and hurt warring across his face. "What are you talking about, Sarah? We have planned everything together. We want the same things." "No, we do not." I pulled the ring off my finger, the metal sliding easily over my knuckle. It had been loose lately, probably because I had been too nauseous to eat much since discovering the pregnancy. "I have realized that I am not cut out for your world. The social expectations. The pressure to be someone I am not. I want something simpler." "Then we will have something simpler," Daniel said immediately, reaching across the table for my hands. "Sarah, I do not care about any of that. We can live however you want to live." I pulled my hands away before his touch could weaken my resolve. "It is not just about how we live. It is about who we are. You are going to inherit your family business someday. You will need a wife who can support that world, who understands it. I am not that person. You are exactly that person," Daniel insisted, his voice rising with desperation. "You are intelligent, beautiful, kind. You are everything I want in a wife, in a partner." "Sarah, where is this coming from? Last week you were excited about looking at apartments for next year. What changed?" "Everything." I wanted to say everything changed when your father showed me exactly what your family is capable of. When I realized that loving you is not enough to protect the child growing inside me. Instead I placed the sapphire ring on the table between us. The small click of metal against would sounding like a gunshot in the quiet coffee shop. "I am giving you back your ring." Daniel stared at the ring as if it were a snake. "Whoa. No, Sarah. This is crazy. Whatever is wrong, we can fix it. We love each other. Love is not always enough," I said quietly, hating myself for the truth in those words. "It is for us," Daniel said fiercely. "Has to be." I stood up before I could lose my nerve entirely. "I'm sorry, Daniel. Truly am. But this is for the best. For the best." Daniel shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. "How is breaking up for the best? Sarah, talk to me. Tell me what is really going on here." For one terrible moment I almost did. Almost told him about his father threats. About the pregnancy. about the impossible choice I was being forced to make. But Richard Blackwood's warning echoed in my mind. Daniel would never forgive himself for ruining my future, and I would never forgive myself for ruining his. Goodbye, Daniel, I whispered and walked away from the only man I had ever loved. 2 weeks later I lost the baby. I was alone when it happened, cramping and bleeding in my small apartment on a cold Thursday morning. By the time I made it to the hospital emergency room, it was already over. 7 weeks of pregnancy ended as quickly and quietly as it had begun. These things happen sometimes, the doctor told me gently, often in the first trimester. It does not mean anything was wrong with you or that you cannot have healthy pregnancies in the future. But I knew the truth. I had sacrificed my relationship with Daniel to protect a child who was already gone. I had destroyed our love for nothing. Daniel tried to contact me during those weeks, leaving messages I did not return, showing up at places he knew I would be. I avoided him with the skill of someone whose heart was too shattered to risk further breaking. Eventually he stopped trying. Eventually he graduated and moved away, and I never saw him again until tonight. 6 months after our breakup, Marcus Andrews asked me to marry him. Marcus was a business associate of my father, 10 years older than me, and nothing like Daniel in any way. He was stable, predictable, completely safe. When I said yes, it was not because I loved him. It was because I was tired of being alone with my grief. Tired of seeing Daniel's grandmother Sapphire ring every night before bed and remembering everything I had lost. I thought I could learn to love Marcus. I thought that safety and security might be enough to build a life on. I was wrong about that, as I had been wrong about so many things. Marcus was controlling in ways that took years to fully understand. Started small. Suggestions about my clothes, my friends, the way I spoke in public. Gradually those suggestions became demands, then ultimatums. He isolated me from my college friends, convinced me that my family was not good enough for his social circle, made me financially dependent on his monthly allowance. What I had mistaken for protection was actually possession. For 28 years I had lived as Marcus' wife, playing the role he had scripted for me. I learned to be quiet at dinner parties, to dress appropriately for his business functions, to ask permission before spending money or making plans. I became the kind of woman who apologized for existing too loudly in spaces where I was not wanted. But I never forgot Daniel. I carried our love story inside me like a secret wound that never quite healed. I kept his grandmother Sapphire ring hidden in my jewelry box, though I told myself I would return it someday when the pain was not so sharp. I read business news religiously, following his career from a distance as he built his own empire without his family help. I celebrated his successes and mourned his failures from afar, always wondering if he ever thought of me. Now sitting in Marcus' car as he raged about the humiliation I had caused him, I clutched Daniel's business card and felt something I had not experienced in decades. Oh, whatever had brought Daniel back into my life, whatever cosmic joke or cruel twist of fate had made him the new CEO of the company Marcus needed to impress, it felt like a second chance I had never dared to dream of. The question was whether I was brave enough now to discover what might have been different if I had chosen to fight instead of run. I spent 4 sleepless nights staring at Daniel's business card before I found the courage to call. Each time I picked up the phone, Marcus' voice echoed in my mind with all the reasons I should not. All the ways this would destroy the carefully constructed life we had built together. But lying awake at 3 in the morning, I realized that carefully constructed was just another way of saying completely hollow. On Friday morning, Marcus left early for a breakfast meeting with potential investors. Desperate men like himself trying to save sinking businesses with handshakes and false promises. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway before I walked to the kitchen phone. My hands were trembling as I dialed the number embossed in silver on that white card. Richardson Tech, Mr. Blackwood office. A professional female voice answered. Mrs. I paused, realizing I did not know how to identify myself. I was not Daniel's college girlfriend anymore. I was not his lost love. I was Marcus Andrews' wife calling a man who had declared his feelings for me in front of a ballroom full of powerful people. This is Sarah Andrews. Mr. Blackwood asked me to call. There was a brief silence. Then the voice became noticeably warmer. Of course, Mrs. Andrews. Mr. Blackwood has been expecting your call. Can you hold for just one moment? The wait felt eternal. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Listening to classical music that reminded me of concerts Daniel and I used to attend when we were students. He had introduced me to Mozart and Beethoven, sitting beside me in the university auditorium and watching my face as I discovered the beauty of symphonies I had never had the opportunity to hear before. Sarah. His voice came through the line like a caress. The same way he used to say my name when we were alone together in his apartment, wrapped in each other's arms and talking about our future. Thank you for calling. I almost did not. I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. I'm not sure this is wise. Wise has nothing to do with it. Daniel said softly. Some things are just necessary. Can you meet me for coffee? Somewhere we can talk without interruption. I understood his meaning. Somewhere Marcus would not find us. Would not cause another scene like the one at the gala. There is a small cafe on Maple Street. The Corner Bean. Do you know it? I will find it. Can you be there in an hour? An hour. 60 minutes to decide whether I was brave enough to see him again. To sit across from him and hear whatever he needed to say. 60 minutes to choose between the life I knew and the possibility of something I had thought was lost forever. I will be there, I said and hung up before I could change my mind. The Corner Bean Cafe was tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The kind of place where students nursed single cups of coffee for hours while working on papers or reading novels. I had discovered it years ago during one of my rare solo outings, and I came here sometimes when Marcus control felt too suffocating. When I needed to remember that there was a world beyond our expensive house where people laughed freely and talked about ideas instead of money. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner where the brick walls would provide some privacy. The cafe smelled like roasted coffee beans and fresh baked muffins, and the low murmur of conversation created a cocoon of anonymity. I ordered tea I did not want and watched the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. Daniel arrived exactly on time, scanning the room until his eyes found mine. He looked different in the morning light streaming through the cafe windows. Older, yes, but also more solid somehow. The boy I had loved had grown into a man who commanded attention without demanding it, who wore success like a comfortable sweater. But when he smiled at me, really smiled for the first time since that night at the gala, I saw traces of the 24-year-old who had proposed to me beside a campus lake. You look beautiful, he said as he sat down across from me, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Marcus had not called me beautiful in years. Presentable maybe when I was dressed appropriately for one of his business functions. Acceptable, suitable, never beautiful. You look successful, I replied, deflecting the compliment because I did not know how to accept it anymore. Daniel's smile faded slightly. Success is not the same thing as happiness, Sarah. I learned that the hard way. A waitress appeared to take Daniel's order. Black coffee, the same way he used to drink it in college when we stayed up all night studying together. After she left, an awkward silence stretched between us, filled with 30 years of unspoken words and unanswered questions. Why did you leave? Daniel asked finally, his voice quiet but direct. The real reason, not the story about us wanting different things. I never believed that. Not for 1 second. I had rehearsed this conversation in my mind for 4 days, trying to find words that would explain without revealing too much. But sitting across from him, seeing the pain that still lived in his dark eyes after all these years, I found myself telling him everything. I told him about his father's threats, about the meeting in that cold office where Richard Blackwood had laid out exactly how he would destroy both our futures if I did not walk away. I told him about the pregnancy I had hidden from everyone, about losing the baby 2 weeks after our breakup, about marrying Marcus because I was tired of grieving alone. Daniel listened without interrupting, his face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, he sat in stunned silence for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists on the small cafe table. My father threatened you, he said finally, his voice deadly quiet. And you were pregnant with my child. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Jesus Christ, Sarah. Daniel ran both hands through his hair. A gesture I remembered from when he was overwhelmed or frustrated. Why did you not tell me? Why did you not come to me with this? Because I was 24 and terrified. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Because your father convinced me that loving you would destroy both of us. 'Cause I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. You protected me by breaking my heart and disappearing from my life. You protected me by letting me believe for 30 years that I was not good enough to keep you. The pain in his voice was unbearable. I reached across the table instinctively, covering his clenched fist with my hand. Daniel, I am so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. He turned his hand palm up, capturing my fingers in his. His touch was warm and familiar even after 3 decades. My father died 8 years ago, he said quietly. I spent the last 10 years of his life trying to earn his approval, trying to prove I could build something without his help. I never knew about the threats. Never knew what he did to you. Does not matter now. I said, though we both knew that was a lie. It mattered more than ever because understanding the past was the only way to make sense of the present. Matters to me, Daniel said firmly. It matters because I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not when you left. Not when you married Marcus. Not when I married Jennifer because my parents insisted I needed a suitable wife for appearances. I searched for you, Sarah. For years. I hired investigators, followed leads that went nowhere. I never gave up hope that someday I would find you again. My heart clenched at the pain in his confession. I divorced Jennifer 5 years ago. He continued. Amicable, no children, no real love lost on either side. We both knew we had married for the wrong reasons. And then 2 months ago I finally found you. My investigators tracked down your marriage records, your address. I was planning to approach you carefully, diplomatically. I never imagined I would walk into that gala and see you standing there like something out of a dream. The weight of his words settled between us like a promise and a threat. He had found me. Had been planning to contact me. Had been searching for 30 years. The life I had built with Marcus. The carefully maintained routine of our marriage. The safety I had thought I needed. All of it suddenly felt as fragile as glass. What happens now? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Daniel's hand tightened around mine. That depends on you. I know you are married. I know this is complicated. But Sarah, I also know that what we had was real and I do not think it ever really died. Not for me and I do not think for you either. He was right and we both knew it. Sitting across from him in that small cafe, I could feel the pull between us as strongly as I had when we were 24 and believed that love could conquer anything. But I was not 24 anymore. I was 54 and married to a man who controlled every aspect of my life. Who would never let me go without a fight. Marcus will never give me a divorce. I said quietly. Not willingly. He sees me as a possession, not a person. And he needs my compliance to maintain his image, especially now when his business is struggling. Then do not ask his permission. Daniel said simply. Leave him. Come work for me. I will make sure you are protected financially and legally. The offer hung in the air between us. Tempting and terrifying in equal measure. A job would give me independence. A way to support myself without Marcus' monthly allowance. Working for Daniel would give me a reason to see him every day. To rebuild whatever connection still existed between us. But it would also mean war with Marcus, who would see my employment by Daniel as the ultimate betrayal. I need time to think. I said, though part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Wanted to walk out of that cafe and into a new life without looking back. Daniel nodded, understanding as always. Take all the time you need. But Sarah. He pulled out another business card. This one with his personal cell phone number written on the back. Do not disappear on me again. Whatever you decide, do not just vanish. Cannot go through that again. I took the card. Our fingers brushing once more. I will not disappear. I promised and meant it. We sat in comfortable silence for a few more minutes, drinking coffee that had grown cold while we excavated the ruins of our past. When Daniel finally stood to leave, he leaned down and kissed my cheek gently, the same way he used to when we were students and he was walking me back to my dorm after long study sessions in the library. "I will be waiting," he said softly, "for however long it takes." I watched him leave. This man who had loved me for 30 years without knowing why I had left him. The cafe suddenly felt empty without his presence, as if all the light had gone out of the room. I sat alone with my cold tea and tried to imagine what my life might look like if I was brave enough to choose love over safety, possibility over routine. The drive home was a blur of traffic and racing thoughts. I kept Daniel's business card in my purse next to the first one he had given me at the gala, and I could feel them there like a secret heartbeat. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had almost convinced myself that I could do it. That I could tell Marcus I was leaving. That I was taking a job with Daniel's company. That our marriage was over. But Marcus was waiting for me in the kitchen when I walked through the door, and one look at his face told me that my decision might not be mine to make after all. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion and barely contained rage. "I went for coffee," I said carefully, hanging my purse on the hook by the door and trying to project casual innocence. "Just needed to get out of the house for a while." "Coffee." Marcus repeated the word like it was a foreign concept. "For 3 hours. I had been gone longer than I realized." Time moved differently when you were excavating 30 years of buried feelings. I ran some errands afterward. I lied smoothly. Groceries, dry cleaning, the usual things. Marcus stepped closer, his gray eyes scanning my face for signs of deception. "Groceries? Then where are they?" My stomach dropped. I had been so consumed with thoughts of Daniel, so overwhelmed by our conversation that I had driven straight home without stopping anywhere. "I forgot to pick them up. I was distracted thinking about other things." "What other things?" Marcus' voice was dangerously quiet now. The tone he used when he was trying to control his temper. "What could possibly be so important that you forgot to do the one thing you told me you were going out to do?" I could see the trap closing around me. Could feel Marcus' suspicion crystallizing into something more dangerous. He had always been jealous, possessive. But the encounter with Daniel at the gala had triggered something in him. He knew he was losing control, and a man like Marcus would do anything to maintain his grip on what he considered his property. "Nothing important," I said quietly, hating myself for the familiar capitulation. "I'm sorry. I will go back out and get the groceries now." "Well." Marcus grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh hard enough to leave bruises. "You're not going anywhere. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not until I figure out what the hell is going on with you and Daniel Blackwood." For a moment we stared at each other in the kitchen of the house Marcus had bought to showcase his success. I could see my reflection in his eyes, and what I saw there was not a wife or a partner or even a person. What I saw was a possession that had dared to develop a will of its own. And Marcus Andrews had never been the kind of man who tolerated disobedience. That was when I knew with crystal clarity that choosing Daniel was not just about love or second chances or healing old wounds. It was about survival. Because staying with Marcus would slowly kill every part of me that was still alive. And I had already given him 28 years of my life. Marcus' grip on my arm tightened until I winced and I saw something flicker across his face. Satisfaction at my pain. It was a look I had seen before, though I had always told myself I was imagining it. Marcus Andrews took pleasure in my discomfort, in my compliance, in the small ways he could demonstrate his power over me. "Let go of me," I said quietly, testing the waters of rebellion for the first time in 28 years. "Or what?" Marcus' smile was cold, predatory. "You will call your boyfriend. You will run to Daniel Blackwood and tell him how mean your husband is being." The mockery in his voice was designed to make me feel foolish, childish, as if my feelings were nothing more than a ridiculous fantasy. It was a technique he had perfected over the years. Dismiss, diminish, and control. But something had shifted in me since sitting across from Daniel in that cafe. since learning the truth about why our love had been destroyed. Let go of me, I repeated, my voice stronger this time. Marcus studied my face for a long moment, then released my arm with enough force to make me stumble backward. You think you are in love? He said, his voice dripping with disdain. 54 years old and acting like a teenager with her first crush. It is pathetic, Sarah. Truly pathetic. I rubbed the red marks his fingers had left on my arm. Marks that would be purple bruises by tomorrow. What is pathetic is a man who has to hurt his wife to feel powerful. The words came out before I could stop them, and I saw Marcus' face go white with rage. In 28 years of marriage, I had never spoken to him like that. Had never challenged his authority so directly. We both knew something fundamental had changed between us, and there would be no going back to the careful dance of dominance and submission that had defined our relationship. You want to know about pathetic? Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. Let me tell you about pathetic. Daniel Blackwood spent 30 years looking for you. 30 years of private investigators and false leads and desperate searches. And do you know what is really pathetic? I have known where you were the entire time. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth or humor. You heard me. I knew Daniel was looking for you. I knew about the investigators, the inquiries, the background checks. I made sure every trail went cold. Every lead went nowhere. I protected you from him, Sarah. I kept him away from our marriage, from our life. I stared at my husband. This man I had lived with for nearly 3 decades and realized I did not know him at all. You knew he was searching for me. Course I knew. Daniel Blackwood is not exactly subtle about anything he does. Money talks, sweetheart, and his investigators were not particularly discreet about their inquiries. Marcus straightened his tie. A gesture that usually signaled his return to civilized behavior, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. The first inquiry came about 8 months after we were married. Some private detective calling around asking questions about you. It did not take much to figure out who was behind it. My legs felt weak, and I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter for support. You never told me. Why would I tell you? So you could go running back to your college boyfriend. So you could destroy our marriage for some romantic fantasy. Marcus shook his head dismissively. I protected our relationship, Sarah. I protected you from making a terrible mistake. You protected yourself. I said, understanding flooding through me like ice water. You knew that if Daniel found me, if he told me the truth about why we broke up, I would leave you. Marcus' smile was sharp as a blade. And would you have? If Daniel had shown up at our door 15 years ago, 20 years ago, would you have left me for him? The honest answer was yes, and we both knew it. Even in the depths of my unhappiness with Marcus. Even during the years when our marriage felt like a prison sentence I was serving for crimes I did not remember committing. I would have left him for Daniel without hesitation. Marcus had known that. Had counted on my ignorance to keep me trapped. How? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How did you stop the investigators? Money mostly. Bribes, false information, dead ends. It is amazing what people will do for the right price. Marcus poured himself a glass of whiskey from the bottle he kept on the kitchen counter. His movements casual and unconcerned, as if we were discussing the weather instead of 30 years of systematic manipulation. I had connections too, Sarah. Business associates who owed me favors. Who could make problems disappear for the right consideration. I thought about Daniel sitting across from me in that cafe. Telling me how he had searched for years. How he had never given up hope of finding me. All those years of investigation. Of following leads that went nowhere. Of hiring detective after detective who fed him false information because my husband was paying them to lie. You destroyed his life too. I realized with growing horror. You did not just keep him away from me. You tortured him for 30 years, making him believe I did not want to be found. I saved his life. Marcus corrected coldly. Daniel Blackwood was obsessed with you, Sarah. Completely obsessed. If I had not intervened, he would have wasted his entire future chasing after a woman who had already moved on. Already chosen a different path. I never chose you. I said, the truth spilling out like poison from an old wound. I settled for you. I married you because I was broken and alone and thought I did not deserve better. But I never chose you, Marcus. Not really. For the first time in our conversation, Marcus looked genuinely hurt. Not angry or calculating or controlling, but actually wounded by my words. 28 years of marriage, he said quietly. 28 years of providing for you, protecting you, giving you everything you could possibly need. And this is what I get in return. Contempt. You call it providing. I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. Call it buying compliance. You gave me a house and an allowance and a role to play. But you never gave me choice. You never gave me freedom. You never even gave me the basic respect of honesty. Honesty. Marcus laughed bitterly. You want honesty. Here is some honesty for you. Daniel Blackwood does not love you, Sarah. He loves the memory of you. The fantasy of who you were when you were 24. He has been chasing a ghost for 30 years. And when he realizes that the woman standing in front of him now is not the girl he remembers, he will disappear just as quickly as he appeared. The words were designed to hurt. To make me doubt myself and Daniel and the possibility of a different life. But instead of weakening my resolve, Marcus' cruelty only strengthened it. Because I knew deep in my bones that he was wrong. Daniel had not fallen in love with my 24-year-old self again at that gala. He had looked at me as I was now, 54 and tired and marked by years of emotional abuse. And he had still said he loved me. You are wrong. Said simply. Am I? Let me ask you something, Sarah. When Daniel realizes that you are not the sweet college girl he remembered, when he sees how you have let yourself go, how you have become exactly the kind of middle-aged housewife he would never have chosen for himself, do you really think he will still want you? I looked at my husband, this man who had spent 28 years systematically destroying my self-confidence. And I felt something snap inside me like a taut wire finally breaking under too much pressure. You know what, Marcus? I do not care if Daniel wants me or not. I do not care if he changes his mind tomorrow and decides you are right about everything. 'Cause at least he gave me a choice. At least he offered me the chance to decide for myself what I wanted instead of manipulating and controlling me into compliance. I pulled Daniel business cards out of my purse. Both of them. And set them on the kitchen counter between us like a declaration of war. Daniel offered me a job. Financial independence. The chance to build a life that belongs to me. Not to some man who thinks he owns me. Marcus' face went very still. You're not taking that job. Yes, I am. No, Sarah, you are not. Marcus' voice dropped to the dangerous quiet tone he used when he was about to make threats. 'Cause if you try to leave me, if you try to go work for Daniel Blackwood or anyone else, I will destroy you financially. I will make sure you get nothing in any divorce settlement. I will tie you up in court for years until you are too old and too poor to start over. There it was. The truth about our marriage laid bare. Not love. Not partnership. Not even affection. Just ownership and control backed by the threat of economic destruction. Marcus had never loved me. He had collected me the same way he collected expensive watches and rare wines. As a symbol of his success and good taste. You can try. I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. But Daniel has more money and better lawyers than you will ever have. And unlike you, he does not need to destroy people to feel powerful. The mention of Daniel's superior resources hit Marcus like a physical blow. His face flushed red and I could see the vein in his temple throbbing with suppressed rage. Marcus Andrews hated being reminded that despite all his efforts he was still not truly wealthy. That his money and status were built on leveraged debt and desperate schemes. Daniel represented everything Marcus aspired to be but never could. Real power. Old money. Success that did not depend on crushing other people. Get out of my house. He said finally, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. Gladly. I replied and headed for the stairs to pack my things. You will be back. Marcus called after me. Loud enough that his voice echoed off the walls of the house that had never felt like home. When you realize that Daniel does not want a 54-year-old housewife. When you figure out that you cannot survive in the real world without someone taking care of you. You will come crawling back. And maybe if you ask nicely enough, I will consider taking you back. I paused on the staircase and looked down at my husband of 28 years. This man who had systematically isolated me from everyone I loved. Who had spent 3 decades lying to me about Daniel's attempts to find me. Who honestly believed that I was too weak and too damaged to exist without his control. No, Marcus, I said quietly. I will not be back. 'Cause whatever happens with Daniel, whatever happens with the job or the future or any of it, I finally understand something important. I would rather be alone for the rest of my life than spend one more day with someone who sees me as a possession instead of a person. As I climbed the stairs to pack my clothes, I could hear Marcus behind me, already on the phone with someone. His voice rising and falling in angry explanation. Probably calling his lawyer or his business manager or one of the other men who helped him maintain the illusion of success and respectability. But for the first time in 28 years, I was not listening to Marcus Andrews' voice with fear or anxiety or the need to please. I was listening to it the way you listen to background noise. Something irrelevant that would soon fade away entirely. I had a phone call to make, job to accept, and a life to reclaim. And it was starting right now. I packed 2 suitcases with clothes and the few personal items that actually belonged to me. The sapphire ring Daniel had given me 30 years ago. Photo album from my college days. The books I had collected over the years that Marcus considered worthless clutter. Everything else in that expensive house was his. Chosen by him. Paid for by him. Meant to reflect his taste and status. I did not want any of it. I called Daniel from my car in the parking lot of a hotel downtown. My hands still shaking from the confrontation with Marcus. The sun was setting over the city skyline, painting the buildings in shades of gold and orange that reminded me of the evenings Daniel and I used to spend studying together on the university campus. When the future seemed limitless and love felt strong enough to overcome any obstacle. Sarah. Daniel answered on the first ring as if he had been waiting by the phone. Are you all right? You sound upset. I am leaving him, I said without preamble. My voice steadier than I felt. Marcus, I am leaving him tonight and I won't accept your job offer. There was a moment of silence. Then Daniel's voice came through warm and sure. Where are you? The Riverside Hotel downtown. I could not think of anywhere else to go. Stay there. I will be right over. 20 minutes later I watched through the hotel lobby windows as Daniel's silver car pulled up to the entrance. He emerged wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater. Looking more like the college boy I had fallen in love with than the powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. When he spotted me sitting in one of the lobby leather chairs, his face lit up with a mixture of relief and something deeper. Oh, are you hurt? He asked, sitting down beside me and immediately noticing the bruises on my arm where Marcus had grabbed me. His jaw tightened with controlled anger. Did he put his hands on you? Nothing I cannot handle. I said, though we both knew that was not really true. Marcus' abuse had been psychological for so long that the physical component felt like a natural escalation. Not a shocking departure from his usual behavior. Daniel reached out carefully, gently touching the purple marks on my forearm. No one should ever put their hands on you in anger, Sarah. No one. The tenderness in his voice. The careful way he examined the bruises as if they were wounds he could heal through sheer force of will made tears spring to my eyes. I had forgotten what it felt like to be treated with genuine concern. To have someone care about my pain instead of dismissing it as weakness or melodrama. Tell me what happened, Daniel said quietly. So I did. I told him about Marcus' revelation that he had known about Daniel's search for 30 years. About the systematic sabotage of every investigation. About the threats and manipulation that had kept us apart. Daniel listened with growing rage. His hands clenched into fists as the full scope of Marcus' deception became clear. 30 years. He said finally, his voice rough with emotion. 30 years of wondering if you ever thought about me. If you ever regretted leaving. 30 years of believing that maybe I had not fought hard enough for you. That maybe you really had stopped loving me. I never stopped loving you, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Not for one day in 30 years. I married Marcus because I was broken and alone, but I never stopped carrying you in my heart. Daniel turned to face me fully, his dark eyes searching my face. And now, after everything that has happened, after all the time that has passed, what do you want now, Sarah? It was the question I had been afraid to answer even to myself. What did I want from this impossible situation? This second chance that felt like a gift and a test rolled into one. I want to find out who I am when I am not afraid. I said honestly. I want to discover what my life could look like if I am making the choices instead of having them made for me. And I want to find out if what we had was real enough to survive everything that has happened to us. Daniel smiled. The first genuine smile I had seen from him since that moment of recognition at the gala. Then let us find out together. The next morning I walked into the offices of Richardson Tech as Daniel, new director of community outreach. A position he had created specifically for me that would utilize my background in education to develop partnerships with local schools and literacy programs. It was meaningful work. The kind of job I had always dreamed of having. And the salary Daniel offered was more than Marcus' monthly allowance multiplied by $23,000 a week. He had said when we discussed the position over dinner the night before. Plus benefits, health insurance, retirement contributions, and complete autonomy over your department. I want you to have financial independence, Sarah. I want you to never again be dependent on someone else's generosity for your basic needs. The money was more than I had ever imagined earning. Enough to rent my own apartment, buy my own car, make my own choices about how to spend my time and resources. But more than the financial freedom, the job represented something I had thought was lost forever. The chance to be valued for my mind instead of my compliance. My ideas instead of my silence. Daniel assistant Rebecca welcomed me warmly and gave me a tour of the offices, introducing me to department heads and explaining the company various community initiatives. Everyone was professional and friendly, treating me like a valued colleague rather than the boss' personal project. By the end of my first day, I felt more energized and purposeful than I had in decades. But Marcus was not finished with his attempts to control the narrative. 4 days into my new job, Daniel called me into his office with a grim expression. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind me. "Marcus has been busy." He handed me a legal document, thick with official seals and threatening language. Marcus was suing me for abandonment, claiming that Daniel had deliberately interfered with our marriage and seeking financial damages for the destruction of our relationship. It was an archaic legal concept rarely used in modern divorce proceedings, but Marcus had found lawyers willing to pursue it. He has also filed for an injunction to freeze any joint assets until the divorce is finalized. Daniel continued. Bank accounts, credit cards, even the car you have been driving. He is trying to cut off your access to everything. I sank into the chair across from Daniel's desk, feeling the familiar weight of Marcus' manipulation settling over me like a suffocating blanket. Even when I tried to escape his control, he found new ways to trap me. New methods to remind me of my dependence on his generosity. He wants me to come crawling back, I said quietly. He thinks if he can make me desperate enough, scared enough, I will give up and return to him. Daniel sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that I could see the determination burning in his dark eyes. Then he does not know you very well. But Sarah, there is something else. Something that might change the entire situation. He pulled out another set of documents. These ones bearing the letterhead of a prestigious law firm. I had my lawyers do some investigating into Marcus' business practices, particularly his consulting firm and real estate investments over the past decade. Turns out your husband has been playing some very dangerous games with other people's money. I looked at the papers, trying to make sense of the legal language and financial terminology. What kind of games? The kind that could land him in federal prison. Daniel said grimly. Marcus has been using his consulting company as a front for embezzlement operations. Client money gets invested in his personal accounts. He falsifies records to cover the theft. The Securities and Exchange Commission has been building a case against him for months. The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus, for all his faults, had always seemed like a legitimate businessman, if not a particularly successful one. The idea that he was involved in criminal activity felt surreal. Like discovering that the man I had lived with for 28 years was actually a stranger. "How long have you known about this?" Yes. I suspected something was wrong with his finances when I started researching his company for due diligence. Daniel admitted. The numbers did not add up. The client list was questionable. But I did not have proof until my lawyers started digging deeper. I stared at the documents, understanding the implications of what Daniel was telling me. If Marcus was arrested for embezzlement, his assets would be frozen. His business would be shut down. And any claims he had against me in the divorce would become irrelevant. But it also meant that the man I had married, however unhappily, was a criminal who had been using our home and our marriage as cover for illegal activities. "What do we do?" Yes. Daniel's expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the protectiveness in his eyes. The same fierce determination that had driven him to search for me for 30 years. "We do nothing. The SEC will do their job and Marcus will face the consequences of his choices. But Sarah, you need to understand. When this comes out, and it will come out soon, there is going to be a lot of media attention. Your marriage to Marcus will be scrutinized. Your connection to me will be public knowledge. It is going to be uncomfortable for a while." I thought about the house I had shared with Marcus. The expensive furniture and designer decorations that had apparently been purchased with stolen money. I thought about the charity events we had attended. The business associates we had entertained. All of it part of Marcus' elaborate facade of respectability. How much of our life together had been built on lies I never knew were being told. "I do not care about the media attention," said finally. "I care about doing the right thing. And the right thing is letting the truth come out. Whatever that means for Marcus or for me." Daniel nodded, something like pride flickering across his face. The woman I fell in love with 30 years ago would have said exactly the same thing. 3 weeks later, Marcus Andrews was arrested at his office on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and securities violations. The local news media covered the story extensively, focusing on the dramatic fall of a prominent businessman and the millions of dollars in client money that had funded his lifestyle. Our divorce proceedings became a footnote to the larger criminal case, with Marcus' lawyers too busy trying to keep him out of federal prison to pursue harassment lawsuits against me. I watched the news coverage from Daniel's penthouse apartment where I had been staying since leaving the hotel. It felt surreal to see Marcus in handcuffs being led away from the office building where he had conducted business for decades. This man who had controlled every aspect of my life for 28 years looked small and frightened on television. No longer the intimidating figure who had dominated our marriage. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked, sitting beside me on the sofa as the news anchor moved on to other stories. "Free," I said, surprising myself with the honesty of the answer. "For the first time in decades, I feel completely free." Daniel reached over and took my hand, our fingers interlacing naturally. "Free to do what?" I looked at this man who had loved me for 30 years, who had given me a job and financial independence, and the chance to discover who I was when I was not afraid. I thought about the sapphire ring hidden in my purse, the symbol of promises we had made when we were young and believed that love could conquer anything. Maybe it could. Free to find out if it is possible to fall in love with the same person twice, I said softly. Daniel's smile was answer enough. Over the next 6 months, my life transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The job at Richardson Tech became more than just employment. It became a passion. I developed literacy programs for underprivileged schools, created mentorship opportunities for young women pursuing education, built partnerships with community organizations that made real differences in people's lives. For the first time in decades, I was using my education degree, the teaching skills I had developed in those brief years before I married Marcus and gave up on all my professional dreams. I was making a difference in the world and being valued for my contributions. Daniel and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. We had coffee together every morning before work, discussing books and ideas and current events the way we used to in college. We went to concerts and art museums, taking time to rediscover each other as the people we had become rather than trying to recreate who we had been. We talked about everything: the pain of our separation, the years we had lost, the mistakes we had both made. But we also talked about hope and second chances and the possibility of building something new from the ruins of our past. Daniel never pressured me for more than I was ready to give. Never assumed that his love gave him ownership over my choices. He gave me space to heal, to grow, to figure out who Sarah Andrews was when she was not defined by fear or control. And slowly, carefully, I fell in love with him all over again. Not the desperate, all-consuming love of youth that believes passion alone is enough, but something deeper, more sustainable. A love built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. On choosing each other every day not because we needed each other but because we wanted to share our lives. 8 months after I left Marcus, I stood in front of the mirror in my new apartment. The small but beautiful space I had rented with my own money, earned through my own work. I was getting ready for a date with Daniel, our first real date since reuniting. Not a business dinner or a casual coffee but an actual romantic evening. I wore a simple blue dress I had bought myself. Not from a thrift store out of desperate necessity but from a boutique because I liked how it made me feel. My hair was styled the way I wanted it. My makeup reflected my own taste rather than someone else's standards. Looking at my reflection, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She looked confident, happy, free. Nothing like the trapped, frightened person who had stood in shadows at that gala 8 months ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. I am downstairs whenever you are ready. No rush. Take your time. Even in small things he showed respect for my autonomy. My right to move at my own pace. I grabbed my purse, locked my apartment door and headed downstairs. My heart was beating fast but not with fear or anxiety. With excitement. With anticipation. With the pure joy of someone who had been given a second chance at happiness and was brave enough to take it. Daniel was waiting by his car, wearing slacks and a dress shirt that made him look distinguished but approachable. When he saw me, his face lit up with the same expression he had worn 30 years ago when I walked into that diner and changed both our lives forever. You look beautiful, he said simply, opening the car door for me. Thank you, I replied, and this time I did not deflect the compliment. I accepted it as true because I finally believed I deserved to hear it. Dinner was at a quiet Italian restaurant overlooking the river. The kind of place with candles on the tables and soft music playing in the background. We talked and laughed and shared stories about our workdays. About the programs I was developing. About the new technologies Daniel Company was pioneering. We talked about everything and nothing. The way couples do when they are comfortable enough to enjoy each other's company without needing to fill every silence. After dinner we walked along the riverside path. The city lights reflecting off the water like scattered stars. Daniel took my hand as we walked, and the simple gesture felt profound. A choice we were both making. To be together. Try again. To believe that love could survive even the cruelest separations. Sarah, Daniel said, stopping at a spot where willow trees created a canopy of privacy. I want to ask you something, but I do not want you to feel pressured. If you are not ready, just say so and we will never mention it again. My heart started racing. I thought I knew what he was going to say, but I waited, letting him find the words in his own time. I know we have only been rebuilding our relationship for 8 months. I know we both have scars from the past that are still healing. But Sarah, I am 55 years old and I have spent 30 of those years loving you, searching for you, hoping for exactly this moment. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The same one I remembered from our engagement 30 years ago. When he opened it, the sapphire ring caught the moonlight exactly the way it had beside that campus lake when we were young and believed that promises made with tears of joy were unbreakable. This ring has been waiting for you for 30 years. Daniel said softly. Just like I have been waiting. Sarah, will you marry me? Will you give me the honor of spending whatever years we have left making you as happy as you have always made me? Tears streamed down my face, but they were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of joy, of relief, of gratitude for second chances and patient love and the courage to try again even when the world had taught us that trying was pointless. I said, my voice shaking with emotion. Yes, Daniel, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto my finger where it belonged, where it should have stayed 30 years ago. And when he kissed me, it felt like coming home after a very long journey through darkness. We are really doing this, I said when we finally pulled apart. Both of us smiling like teenagers who had just discovered love for the first time. We are really doing this, Daniel confirmed. And this time nothing is going to tear us apart. No family interference. No manipulation. No fear. Just us choosing each other every single day. I looked down at the sapphire ring on my finger, thinking about all the years it had spent hidden in my jewelry box. All the nights I had looked at it and wondered what my life might have been like if I had been brave enough to fight for love instead of accepting safety. Now I knew, and I was never letting go again. We set the wedding date for 3 months later. Long enough to plan something meaningful but short enough that we were not wasting any more time. At our age, every day mattered. Every moment was precious. The wedding would be small and intimate. Just close friends and family. Daniel's sister flew in from Boston. My college roommate who I had reconnected with after years of Marcus in forced isolation. Rebecca from the office who had become a dear friend. The team members from my department who had welcomed me so warmly. We chose to get married in the botanical gardens where Daniel and I used to study together during our college years. Among the flowers and trees that had been silent witnesses to our young love. It felt right to exchange vows in a place that held so many memories of who we had been and who we were becoming. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in my apartment feeling calm and certain. No second thoughts. No cold feet. No fear that I was making a mistake. This was right. This was where I was meant to be. Rebecca came over to help me get ready, doing my hair and makeup while we talked and laughed about everything and nothing. She had become the sister I never had. The friend who knew all my secrets and loved me anyway. Are you nervous? She asked as she fastened a pearl necklace around my neck. Something borrowed from her own jewelry collection. Not even a little bit. I said honestly, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. The dress I chose was simple and elegant. Cream-colored lace that fell to my knees. Appropriate for a woman my age but still beautiful and romantic. I wore my hair down the way Daniel loved it. And I carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that reminded me of the ones that grew near our campus lake. When I arrived at the botanical gardens, I could see Daniel waiting for me at the end of a flower-lined path. He wore a charcoal suit and his face when he saw me was radiant with happiness. The ceremony was brief and deeply personal. Instead of traditional vows, Daniel and I had written our own. Words that acknowledged the pain of our separation and the miracle of our reunion. When Daniel spoke about loving me through 30 years of absence. About never giving up hope that we would find our way back to each other. There was not a dry eye among our guests. I promised to never let fear make decisions for us again. I said when it was my turn to speak. I promised to trust that love is worth fighting for. Worth choosing every day. Worth believing in even when it seems impossible. I promise to be your partner in all things. Your equal in all ways. And to love you with everything I have for whatever time we are given. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Daniel kissed me with 30 years of pent-up longing and gratitude. The garden erupted in applause and joyful laughter, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat, and Daniel whispered finally against my lips. The reception was held in a beautiful garden pavilion. White lights strung overhead. Soft music playing. Tables covered in flowers and candles. It was everything Marcus and my wedding had not been. Intimate. Joyful. Focused on celebration rather than status. During our first dance, Daniel and I swayed to the same song we had danced to at our college graduation party 31 years ago. Unforgettable. With its promise of enduring love and timeless devotion, felt prophetic now in a way it had not then. Any regrets? Daniel asked as we moved together. His arms strong and certain around me. Only one, I said, smiling up at him. I regret that we lost 30 years. But I do not regret the path that led us back to each other. Without everything we have been through, I might not appreciate how precious this is. Daniel spun me gently, and I caught a glimpse of our guests watching us with the kind of satisfaction that comes from witnessing a long overdue happy ending. Rebecca was crying happy tears. Daniel's sister was smiling broadly. Even my old college roommate was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. After the formal dances ended, Daniel and I stepped outside onto the garden terrace for a few moments of quiet together. The city skyline sparkled in the distance, and above us the stars filled the night sky with brilliant light. Do you remember what we used to say about the stars? Daniel asked, following my gaze upward. I smiled at the memory. That they had been burning for millions of years and they would burn for millions more. That some things were permanent even when everything else felt temporary. Like us, Daniel said simply. Like this. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph he had taken during the ceremony. The moment when I walked down the aisle toward him. My face glowing with happiness and certainty. In the background the flowers bloomed magnificently. Eternal witnesses to our second chance at love. I want to remember this moment exactly as it is. Daniel said. I want to remember how it feels to finally have everything I have ever wanted. As we stood together on that terrace surrounded by the celebration of our love and the promise of our shared future, I thought about Marcus serving his sentence in prison. About the house I had shared with him now sold to pay restitution to his victims. I felt no vindictive satisfaction at his downfall. Only a quiet gratitude that his lies and manipulations were no longer my burden to carry. I thought about Richard Blackwood, Daniel's father who had died 10 years earlier, still believing that he had successfully separated his son from an unsuitable woman. He had never lived to see Daniel and me reunited. Had never been forced to confront the failure of his cruel schemes. Perhaps that was justice enough. Most of all I thought about the woman I had been 8 months ago. Trapped, controlled, convinced that safety was more important than happiness. She felt like a stranger now. Someone I remembered with compassion but no longer recognized as myself. The woman I had become was stronger, braver, more willing to fight for what mattered. She was someone I was proud to be. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked, noticing my contemplative expression. The future, I said honestly. Our future. All the mornings we will wake up together. All the decisions we will make as partners instead of strangers sharing a house. All the years we have left to love each other properly. Daniel lifted my left hand to his lips, kissing the sapphire ring that had finally found its way home. 54 is not too late for a new beginning, is it? I looked at my husband, my true husband,